Good evening to everyone. This is 18th lecture in the series of Vijnana Ganga. Now you can see the speaker. Unfortunately, we could not put his photograph on the banner. I am introducing speaker. Surendra Ghaskadbi is a CSIR Emeritus Scientist in the Developmental Biology Group at MACS Agharkar Research Institute, Pune, an autonomous institute of Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. His main research interests are cell signaling during pattern formation, evolution of developmental mechanisms, and stem cell biology. He has used a variety of model systems such as chick and frog embryos, sponges, hydra and human mesenchymal, and embryonic stem cells in his work. For the past decade and a half, he has reintroduced Hydra as a model system for teaching and research in India. His research has been funded by DST, Department of Science and Technology, DBT, Department of Biotechnology, CSIR, Council of Industrial and Scientific Research, DAE, Department of Atomic Energy, within which BRNS is the funding agency, and Indo-Japan grants. Dr. Ghaskadbi has published his work in reputed peer-reviewed journals and has several national and international collaborations. He has delivered a large number of talks in national and international meetings and student camps. This is one of the likings to chit-chat with the students. Dr. Ghaskadbi and contributes to postgraduate teaching in many institutions in and outside Pune. Dr. Ghaskadbi has been associated with several scientific organizations in India. He has been President of Indian Society of Developmental Biologists, Vice President of Indian Society of Cell Biology, and is an elected Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences, India, and Maharashtra Academy of Sciences. So today he is going to deliver a lecture on genetics. This particular science is progressing very fast in the world. India is also contributing quite a lot in it, and Dr. Surendra Ghaskadbi is one of the leading scientists in the subject. So I request Mr. Sharad Kale to welcome him with. I request Dr. Ghaskadbi to deliver the lecture.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I am very grateful to Sri Sharad Kale and Sri A.P. Deshpande for giving me this opportunity to come from Pune to Mumbai and discuss with you all. I have been asked to, maybe you can switch off some lights if it is possible, maybe some of the lights, because I have some pictures there, so it may not be. It's a very vast area, as you know, that several universities, hundreds and thousands of books have been written on genetics. But I think the idea was to just give you a flavor of what is happening, what is the history of genetics, and what are the major probably contributions of genetics to human life and medicine, and what is happening today. And I'll give you our latest news which has happened earlier this month, which is about how you edit the human genome. So I'll try to cover these areas at a very superficial level, in the sense that I will not go into deep, but if anybody wants to discuss, we can always discuss it. So I'll cover it in 5 different steps, let's say about 8 minutes each, so I finish in 40-45 minutes. So firstly, I'll tell you about the basic work of Mendel, Gregor Mendel, who is considered to be the father of genetics, and try to explain some basics of genetics with a few examples. Then how molecular genetics came into being, because that has been a quantum jump in our knowledge of genetics. Then lessons from animal model. We know that we obviously cannot work with human beings. the only opportunity, we can't call it an opportunity actually, but the only occasion on which one can use human beings as, experimental material is only through tragedies, like the Bhopal gas tragedy or somewhere. We can't use human material usually. So animals have been very useful for us to give us insights into genetics. Then something about stem cells and how it was useful and how genetics was useful in cloning Dolly, the sheep, and whether it is going to take us further from there. And finally, the Human Genome Project. So let us, so this is the kind of diversity that you see in animals, and there is equal diversity in plants also. And there are genes responsible for that. So these are the molecules which give us the hereditary characters. But what I am going to discuss today is not about the diversity, but about this. You can see Sachin Tendulkar and Amitabh Bachchan. We are from an earlier generation, so not Virat Kohli and Ranbir Kapoor, for example. But having the same genome, these two individuals are so different. And I don't see any identical twins in this hall. So all of us have the same human genome, and still we are so very different. So we'll try to understand how this happens in spite of having the similar kind of DNA. So let's define genetics. Genetics is the field of biology that deals with the study of heredity. Okay, that we all know. So the transmission of traits from the parents to the offsprings. Okay, so this is essentially genetics. And it was earlier considered that it's all in the blood, royal blood, you come from this blood, blue blood, bloodline, and so on. And it was also considered at one stage that there are factors called gemmules. These are miniature adults which circulate in the blood. This is what was considered. And then it was thought that the blood is transferred to the offspring. But now we know that the blood is not transferred to the offspring, and the semen also does not contain blood. So we know that blood is not responsible. So this theory was discarded, that it's not the blood which is responsible. Now, of course, even lay people call it that it's in the genes. They no more call it it's in the blood, because science is being decimated through media. So this is Gregor Mendel. This was in 19th century. What he did was he used pea plants, okay, and he used a number of characters of the pea plants. For example, the height, the color of the seed, how the flowering takes place, and then he bred these pea plants for a long, long time. He was actually a priest, but in olden days of Aristotle and so on, many naturalists had some other vocation, and they used to do this as a hobby. So Gregor Mendel did a lot of breeding experiments and came out with two very important rules of genetics. One of these is the law of dominance, and this is important for us to understand, to appreciate further discussion. One factor or the gene of a pair may mask the effect of another. That means there are always two pairs, and I'll come to it as to why we have a pair of genes. One of them is dominant, the other is recessive. Okay, so the dominant one shows its effect in the offspring, and the second is law of segregation. That means during reproduction, the genes are separated into different gametes. Gametes means our germ cells. For example, oocyte is the female gamete, sperm is the male gamete. So these are distributed, and I'll shortly tell you what is the consequence of these two rules. So he was the one who actually found out that these rules exist. So a cell contains two copies of each gene, and I'll tell you, I hope you know what is a cell. We are made up of cells, we are made up of trillions of cells. Every cell in our body has the complete genome that we possess, and we have a total of 46 chromosomes, okay, in each cell, and 23 pairs. And every chromosome contains hundreds of genes. So a human being is supposed to contain about 20 to 25,000 genes. You require about 25,000 genes to make a human being. It was earlier thought that since we are so complex and we understand Bhimsen Joshi and whatnot, we must be having 100,000 genes. But it turns out that we are not all that different from insects and elephants and so on. So at the genetic level, we are actually very similar to all other animals. So there are 2 copies of every gene, as I said, and they get separated during reproduction. I'll explain to you how this happens. So this is the formation of the sperm here, and this is the formation of the egg, okay? And you can see that there are a number of chromosomes present. This is an example only with 4 so that it doesn't become complicated. But when this mother cell of the sperm divides, you can see that these are being distributed in different sperms. Only one copy is distributed. For example, look at the red one and look at the blue one. In these 4 sperms, only one red and one blue is present, so they are segregated. That means only one copy of the gene goes to one sperm, not the other. Okay? So already a diversity is introduced. It might be getting a little technical, but I think it is important to understand that when there are 2 alleles of the gene, 2 molecules of the gene, the dominant and the recessive will get redistributed. So one sperm will contain dominant, the other sperm might contain dominant or recessive, only single one of them. While the egg also has only one copy of each. Now when these 2 combine, there is unlimited combination of genes. So that is how diversity is introduced, okay? So around 1900, cytologists and geneticists began to see parallels between behavior of chromosomes and behavior of Mendel's factors. So that's when they realized. By then Mendel had already passed away, nobody appreciated his work. So it was what is known as rediscovery of Mendel's work. And in this, then people looked at Mendel's factor and they realized that Mendel's factors is nothing else but the chromosomes that we contain in our cells. Okay? And chromosomes are thread-like strands of chemical material located in the nucleus. So these are human chromosomes, for example. There are many different kinds of techniques that people have now used, and you can label different chromosomes with different colors. You know, molecular biology has made this possible. So each one of us has 23 pairs of chromosomes, okay? All the ladies in this room will have 2 X chromosomes. All the gents will have 1 X and 1 Y. That's what makes males males. Y chromosome is the male chromosome which is absent in women, okay? So these are, others are, all these 22 pairs are autosomes which make our body. These are the ones which decide the sex. And therefore, if the sperm contains X, the offspring will become a girl. If the sperm contains Y, the offspring will become a boy. And it is purely by chance. There are many advertisements which will probably say that we can enrich Y sperms and so on. It has no scientific basis. So our somatic cells are diploid. That means we have 23 pairs. Haploid means 23, diploid means 46. So all our cells are diploid. That means we have 46 chromosomes in all our somatic cells. But in all our germ cells, whether it's an oocyte or a sperm, we'll have only half of it. And every half set will either have X and Y, X or Y, and one of these 22. Followed so far? Okay.
You want hand mic?
It's here. No, I think they can even hear me without that. If I can go closer to the board and move a little bit, it will be okay. So that is about dominant and recessive. But you also see in nature some pink colors instead of red and white. And that is because of variation of Mendel's principle in which you have incomplete dominance. So it's not abnormal to have pink color, for example, okay? So there can be incomplete dominant. But if red is dominant and this particular gene is present as a dominant character, the flower will become red. If it is present as a recessive allele, it will become white. But if there is a mixture of the two, one capital R, one small r, the flower will become pink. So this is a variation of what Mendel did. Also, if you look at cholesterol problems in human beings, that also has a basis in incomplete dominance. These are certain receptors for cholesterol. So every cell has certain molecules on its surface by which it takes inside the cholesterol that is circulating in the blood. Okay? So if the both the dominant characters are present in a human being, then that human being is normal. He will never get hypercholesteria. Okay? But if there is a mixture of one capital H, one small h, then the number of receptors become from 4 to 2. So the capacity of this cell will become half to take in cholesterol. So this person will have the disease, but not a very critical one. But this person who has both small h, does not have any ability in its cell to take up cholesterol, and this person is likely to get atherosclerosis very fast. Okay, do I make sense? Okay. So, basis of many diseases is in the heredity. There are also many genes who have more than 2 alleles in the population. I said one dominant and one recessive, but blood group is different. In blood group, you can have A, B, or O, isn't it? So these are variations in genetics. Finally, in the introduction part, there are also certain traits in us. For example, in that flower, we talked about red flower, but we didn't talk about the size of the flower. That comes from a different gene. So these things like skin color, our height, our eye color are polygenic traits. That means they do not come from a single gene, like the, let's say, brown eye only, but there are various shades of eye, color of eye, because it is controlled by many genes at the same time. So, you know, sometimes you will see offspring of various heights born to the same parents. Okay? That is because many genes are controlling, and it depends on what gene is contributing to what extent. Depending on that, you know, one brother can be a little fairer than the other and so on. So these varieties are normal, but these are controlled also by genes. It was in 1953 that we came to know about the structure of DNA. Okay? DNA is the genetic material which is present in our body. So human genome or any genome of any organism, whether it's plant, bacteria, animal, and so on, is made up of DNA. Okay? And this DNA structure was found by these two scientists, James Watson and Francis Crick, in 1953, and they got a Nobel Prize for that in 1962. What it told us is that genes are actually made up of DNA. So genes are big molecules which are made up of a chemical known as deoxyribonucleic acid, which is DNA. And the structure was found by them. Now what this deciphering this structure made was a huge jump in our understanding of how genetics works, and that's why I'm touching upon it. So what happens is we have DNA in our nucleus. This DNA is a code of chemical bases which decides which proteins will be formed in our body. And proteins are the ones which give us form and shape. Okay? So proteins actually decide which color my eye will be, which color my skin will be, and so on. So this DNA is translated into another chemical called as RNA, that is ribonucleic acid, and this ribonucleic acid comes to the cytoplasm of the cell and codes for different proteins that are present in our body. I told you that we have about 20 to 25,000 genes. Now these genes may code for several different proteins. One gene can code for many proteins because parts of genes can code for different proteins. So we have several proteins in our body, and all the functions of our body are carried out by proteins, whether they are enzymes which are used in digestion or whether there are any other signals in our body. So the deciphering of the structure of DNA actually made a huge jump in our understanding of genetics. So this is the structure of DNA, okay? It is in the form of a double helix. This is one helix, this is the other helix. And it is made up of 4 different chemicals. They are shown as ATGC, but we will not go into that because we don't want to get it more complicated. So DNA is present in the nucleus. Because of its code, it forms another acid, as I told you, that is RNA, ribonucleic acid. It's a messenger, so it is known as mRNA, messenger RNA. This messenger RNA comes to the cytoplasm and makes the proteins. Polypeptide is a small protein. Many polypeptides come together to form a protein. So, from the structure of the DNA, we essentially understood that that's how proteins are formed, from DNA to RNA to protein. But our genetics is based in DNA. So any change in this DNA structure will change the proteins that we make in the body, and therefore we can change our phenotype or how we look. If there is a slight change here, then sometimes the red blood cells in our body, which are usually rounded, can become different shape, which is known as sickle-like, sickle that the farmers use. And then because of one change, you get sickle cell anemia, because your blood, now hemoglobin becomes different and you get a disease. So even a slight change, a minute change in the DNA can lead into a major disease like the sickle cell anemia. So this is the genetic basis of many diseases. Now let's come to the animals that generally scientists use, and I will not go into details, but we use things like small worms which you can grow in small petri plates in the lab. We use the fruit fly, Drosophila, these are the flies when you forget some old bananas at home and you will see some flies with red eyes there. These are very useful animals in biology. Then you have the frog tadpole here. This is a fish, this is a chicken embryo, you have the mouse embryo and so on. So what we essentially do, all the scientists do, is they choose animals as models to work with. So depending on the query that you want to ask, for example, if you want to ask as to how the wing of insect develop, then you will study the development of wing in this particular fruit fly so that you can find out how it does. If you want to find out how this mouse embryo actually develops inside its mother, you can get insights as to how human embryo develops inside the mother. Because you can't study human embryos, you can't use human embryos. So you need models, okay? And therefore, there are several models that scientists use to find out information about normal biology as well as normal health. So all our knowledge of normal biology and health has come by studying abnormalities that you find in these animals. Now let me take one example only, and this is the fruit fly that I mentioned that one can see at home. It's a tiny fly, and this is an insect. All insects have three body parts. This is the head, this is the thorax, and this is the abdomen. That means head, trunk, and remaining part of the body. Okay, and people have been studying for a very long time as to how these different parts of the body give rise to different organs. For example, why there are legs only here and not here? Okay, why there is a wing here but not on the head? Why there is an eye here but not here? It's very important to find that, because we get several abnormalities in human beings. So we must know as to how normal things are formed. And for that you need to study the abnormal. Now when biologists study abnormality these days, what they do is they do mutation. Now let me explain what is mutation. So I told you about the example of the sickle cell anemia. So if one base here, this G is changed, let's say to C, then it is a single point mutation. That means you are changing the sequence of the DNA, which leads into formation of abnormal proteins. So what scientists do is they introduce mutations, introduce abnormalities purposely for experimental sake. And obviously you can use only animals for this purpose. And that too, if the ethical committee on animals gives its permission. Okay? So what essentially people do these days is they introduce one mutation at a time in a single gene and see the effect in the adult body. Are you following this? So you mutate one gene at a time. Say, let's say Drosophila has say 12,000 genes. Okay? You introduce abnormality in one gene in the early development and see what happens in that. And based on that, you know the function of the original gene. Okay? So I'll give you a few examples from Drosophila, wherein what they have shown is that Drosophila has a chromosome like this. Okay? Bother about the names or anything that is written. Just look at the colors. What this does is that this part of the chromosome, red, is responsible for formation of this part of the head. Okay? The blue part here is responsible for the formation of its abdominal, these segments here. or the brown part here is responsible for formation of the second pair of legs. You know, insects have 6 legs, so you can see 3 on one side. Okay? So these chromosomal factors, which are actually genes, are responsible for formation of individual organs here. Okay? How did the scientists find that out? They actually introduced mutations in individual genes and tried to find out what happens in the adult fly. So here is an example. This is a normal head of a fly. It is magnified under a microscope, so you see it is a huge thing. So you can see the 2 eyes here on either side. These are the antenna with which insects feel the environment, and these are its mouth parts by which it feeds. Now if you look at it even with a more sophisticated microscope like the electron microscope, which is shown here, you can see that there are 2 eyes, one here, one here. These are the 2 antenna, which are the sensory organs, and these are the mouth parts. Okay? Now when scientists took this gene here, okay, and actually introduced it in the developing head. So instead of this gene working here, they made this gene work here. Okay? And as a result of that, they actually got the leg on the head. Okay? So you can see the leg coming out of the head of Drosophila. It looks terrible, but this is only for, study's sake. I mean, you won't see any Drosophila flying around with legs on their head. These are not released and they don't survive also. But you can see here, the leg is coming out from next to the eye. So from this, the conclusion was that the original gene, this one, is responsible for the formation of the leg. This is how experiments are done in the lab at the molecular level. I'll give you another example. A normal Drosophila fly has only one pair of wings. Okay? These are 2 wings, and you can see here small blobs, which are the balancing organs. Okay? Now, what one can do is, one can exchange these genes, okay, and make a 4-winged fly, or with a fly without wings but these 4 blobs here. So you know which gene is responsible for the formation of the wing and which gene is responsible for the formation of balancer. So this was done for almost all the genes that are responsible to make a fruit fly from a single egg. You know, let me digress a little bit and tell you that we all start our development as a single cell, zygote. When our mother's oocyte is fertilized by our father's sperm, it's a single cell which becomes trillions of cells. And as it becomes, as cells divide, they become a ball of cells first. Later on, they take a shape so that we have dorsal, ventral, anterior, posterior, left, right. All these axes are to be decided early in development because we want to place organs at the proper site. So unless this becomes anterior, the brain won't develop here. So we jokingly say that he has a brain here, but it doesn't happen that way. So our heart will usually loop on the left hand side. There are people with situs invertus, which have heart on the right, but it doesn't matter because it has happened so late, it is still functional. But if it happens in early development, if the brain doesn't develop at the proper site, you will see that the abnormality is so bad that it usually leads into abortion. If the abnormality is less severe, you can get people which do not have normal abilities. Okay? So it depends on when the abnormality takes place. So what I am trying to tell you is that every organ and system in our body has to develop at the proper site. And why it is so important? Because I told you that all our cells of the body, all trillions of cells, contain all the genes. So in principle, they can all form all the organs, but they don't form. There are no multiple hearts in my body. There will be only one heart. There will be only one brain and only those many parts. So all this is decided by individual genes, and that is what is molecular genetics, which is important for how the body plan is established. This is true for plants also. Interestingly, okay, one more example. So somebody thought that this gene I will mutate. He mutated the gene expressed it on the leg of Drosophila, he got an eye. Okay, so eye on the Drosophila leg. Actually, eye was developed here because he expressed the gene there. They also produced a Drosophila, and this came as a cover in the famous journal Science. This Drosophila fly had about 1,000 eyes on its back. So what you can do is, by using how you express the genes, you can actually change the structure of the animal. So the structure is changed not for fun, but to understand the function of individual genes. Okay? This is how, because if everything develops normally, we will never know which gene is responsible for what. So you have to introduce abnormality to find that out. And if these abnormalities, why they are relevant to human beings is because, so this is the chromosome that I showed you from the fruit fly. People later on found out that even mouse has similar chromosomes. Only thing is, unlike the fruit fly, mouse has 4 chromosomes. Fruit fly has only 1. So what has happened is, during evolution, all the mammals, vertebrates have developed 4 such chromosomes. Not only mouse, but it turns out that we also have a similar chromosome. So actually the genes that drive Drosophila development also drive human development. So we are not, so I made the statement earlier that we are not all that different than Drosophila, is because we are actually built of a similar genes. Okay, you can see that they are very, very similar here. So they all are what we call in scientific terms is homologous. So now you compare the genes. This is Drosophila, this is vertebrates. You know, vertebrates are people like us who have vertebral column. Okay. Now you see the color code. Don't bother about numbers, but you see that almost identical genes are present in Drosophila as well as vertebrates. They are also responsible for formation of the same structure. For example, brain, different parts of brain, the genes that the fruit fly uses are the same genes that we use, or even other parts of the body. Okay? So it turned out that the work in the fruit fly is not only of academic interest to only the zoologists, but it turns out that it has relevance even to human beings. So another example of how Drosophila embryo and human embryo are almost identically made. The genes are almost identical. You can see that they are totally similar to each other. But this similarity you can study by various means, in which we will not go into that now. Okay? So mouse embryo can be built also from the same kinds of genes. Now then the work that was considered to be a pure zoological work, then suddenly found out that it has application in medicine. Because all the developmental abnormalities that humans have can be explained on the basis of genes that are found in Drosophila. And therefore, these people who initially worked on Drosophila got a Nobel Prize in medicine in 1995. So these people have never worked on anything other than an insect, but they got a Nobel Prize in medicine. What I am trying to tell you that most of our knowledge of health has come from studying animals rather than human beings. Okay. Here is just another example. There is a disease called P. baldism. Okay, and there are several symptoms of this, but the major symptom is that there are certain areas where the melanin pigmentation is not good, and the gene responsible for this is known as KIT, K-I-T, KIT. Okay, why it is known, we will not go into that. But see, the same gene in mouse exactly gives the same phenotype, same disease. So therefore, if you study this disease in mouse, you can certainly know what is the genetic basis of this happening in human beings. Now, if you know that this particular gene is actually not properly present in the offspring, and if it can be found out from the chromosomes, then parents can consider terminating the pregnancy. That is what is known as counseling these days. Genetic counseling is all about knowing the genetics of the offspring. Okay? Because pretty early in development, you can know how the chromosomes look like, what can be the possible diseases. So the parents can be given a choice as to whether they would like to continue the pregnancy or not. But if the disease is very severe, obviously parents would like not like to continue the pregnancy. So genetics has taught us many things about how diseases occur in humans. Now I'll come to another Nobel Prize which was given in 2012, and this is Professor John Gurdon from Cambridge and Yamanaka from Japan. Okay, they got a Nobel Prize in medicine for what is known as stem cell biology. These days we know so much about stem cell biology. So what they showed was, now before that let me explain what is a stem cell. So as we develop, our body cells become very specialized. For example, my skin cell will do only skin function, okay? Or my blood cell can do only function of, either transporting hemoglobin, or, lymphocyte can do, do some other work. My brain cells have become neurons. Now they will not be able to produce insulin if I get diabetes. You understand? So cells, as we develop, our cells start becoming more and more specialized because they have to carry out spatial function. Liver cells will, be used in detoxification, but they cannot work as beating heart cells. Beating cardiomyocytes are a very specialized cells. They will not be able to do the function of heart. Nobody else will be able to pump the blood other than cardiomyocytes. So these things are decided by our genes, okay? And initially, when we are in the embryonic stage, our cells are not specialized. They are very similar to each other. So let me go to that first. So as development progresses, cells start becoming more and more specialized for specialized function, okay? And that is known as cell differentiation. So cells start becoming different from each other. And this differentiation becomes because different genes are expressed in different cells. Now let me take a very extreme example. For example, mammary gland cells in a lactating female have become specialized to produce milk proteins. Okay? We all know that even my skin cell also has genes to produce milk. Please remember that all our cells have all the genes. So in principle, my skin cell also has capacity to produce milk, but it does not do so because the genes are sleeping, okay, in simple words. They are not active. So cell differentiation, what it does is, it keeps only those genes awake which are required for a specific function. Others are made to sleep forever. What these two scientists who got Nobel Prize did was that they took, for example, a skin cell, and they activated all the 20,000 genes that are present in the cell. So they converted this cell into an embryo-like cell. Okay? And that type of cell is known as stem cell, which has the capacity to differentiate into different kinds of cells. So what John Gurdon did, and this he did in 1960, okay? What he did was he took two frogs. From one frog he took an egg, okay, and removed the nucleus. Okay, this is the nucleus which he removed. He took another frog, okay, and took the skin cell, as I mentioned. From the skin cell he took the nucleus, threw away the cytoplasm, and this nucleus from here was put into this egg. So essentially what he did was, he replaced the original nucleus with a nucleus from a skin cell. What he found was, he could actually form a frog. That means all the genes in this nucleus, which were now sleeping, because they were doing the function only of skin, he woke them up so that they functioned to form a complete frog. So this was the first case of cloning of an animal. This was done in 1960. Okay? To prove that further, what he did is, he took albino frogs. So in frogs also there are some albino varieties. So these have no melanin on their body, they are fair frogs. Okay? So he took, oocyte from a colored frog and put nucleus from a fair frog into this, and all the offsprings were fair. That means the nucleus, the genes in the nucleus were activated so that you got all the fair progeny. So this was the first case of animal cloning that Professor John Gurdon reported. Based on this, Dolly was cloned. Okay, you know about Dolly? So what they did was, Ian Wilmot, the scientist's name, he took one kind of sheep and took the mammary gland cell from it. We know that mammary gland cells are differentiated. Their job is only to produce milk. So he took one cell from there and then used the nucleus from there. Then he took another sheep. Why he took different kinds of sheep is to find out where the clone belongs to which variety. Okay, that is why. Otherwise there couldn't be confusion. If similar sheep are taken, then you won't know whose offspring it is. What he did was he took nucleus from one and egg from another. He removed the nucleus from this egg and put this nucleus into that, and then he put this new embryo that he grew in culture into another type of sheep, a third type of sheep, which was the foster mother. Okay, so that there is no confusion. Nucleus from sheep A, oocyte from sheep B, and the embryo is growing inside the sheep C. But what he got was the clone from this. So Dolly was born who had characters of this sheep A, because the nucleus came from there. That means the genes that were present in this particular sheep were activated in such a way that it could form a whole organism. Okay? So this is Ian Wilmot with his Dolly. Of course, we now know that Dolly has several other problems, and so cloning technique is not very standardized. There are rumors that humans are being cloned, but I don't know whether anybody is stupid enough to do that. The other scientist, what he did was, he used certain techniques in molecular biology to make stem cells. So unlike Professor John Gurdon, he did not use it in an organism, but he used it in Petri plate. Okay? I will not go into details of that, but what was the consequence of that? So what he did was, he took a mouse with sickle cell anemia, okay, and took skin cells from this patient. We'll call him patient because it's very relevant to the disease. These skin cells he converted into what are known as stem cells, okay, and there was a mutation. I told you about sickle cell anemia. There is a single point mutation. He corrected the mutation in the lab. Okay, we can use techniques to correct the mutation, and these cells in which the mutation was now absent were grown in large quantities and injected back into the patient, and he became normal. So you can actually use molecular biology tools to correct mutations and probably also cure diseases. Okay. Now the final part of this talk is about the Human Genome Project. There has been a lot of talk about it. Now we know that we have 25,000 genes, and every gene is made up of a long stretch of DNA which has those small molecules, ATGC. It can run into billions and trillions of molecules. Okay? And it was decided by scientists that all the humans' complete sequence of DNA will be found out. So this was essentially done by public funded institutes, of which Francis Collins was in charge, and a private institute by Craig Venter, and this was published sometime in year 2000, I think. Okay, so Human Genome Project. Now this project was originally proposed in 1985. In 1988, it was initiated, funded by NIH and US Department of Energy. Okay, so $3 billion that time were kept aside for this, okay, for cloning the genome of a single human being. Now this has come down so much that slowly US people will clone their own genome to find out what diseases they have. Okay. So work begins in 1990, and in 1998, the company announced that they will have the genome in 3 years, and both of them published it in 2001. Okay. And then it has been improving. Now, what are the advantages of the gene, Human Genome Project, known as HGP for short, is to create a physical map of all 24 chromosomes. I told you there are 22 autosomes, one X and one Y. So there are 24 chromosomes. Identify the entire set of genes and map them all, so we have information about that. And determine the sequence, those 8TGC are the nucleotides, sequence of 3 billion base pairs. So they estimated that 9.5 years were used to read that. now the computing facility has become so good that this can be finished very fast. Okay, and now it is being used for what is known as personalized medicine. So store this information in databases so that it's available to everybody. Okay, then improve the tools of data analysis, which is a computing thing ultimately. Analyze genetic variation among humans. For example, do genome of both of us and compare what are the differences. They might explain how different we look or how similar, what similarities we have. Address the ethical, legal and social issues. So these are the issues, we have Aadhaar card issues. So these are on a larger scale. Aadhaar is only your fingerprints and retina. This will give everything about you because it is the DNA. Okay, so it's even more serious if it is leaked. Okay, and map and sequence of genomes of model organisms. So the other organisms that I mentioned, like the fruit fly or they also need to be sequenced so that we can compare it with human beings and find out what are the differences. Why does the elephant become an elephant and not a monkey or a human being? Okay. So some of the immediate implications of this is genes associated with numerous diseases and genetic disorders have been found out. So now we know whether these can be either corrected or whether they are present in, very dominantly in the offspring, whether one can consider terminating the pregnancy. About 3 million locations of SNP is known as single nucleotide polymorphism. So these are also responsible for many disease conditions in population. So we'll know this from sequencing the human genome. And finally, this month's early news is, this is early August and all, that scientists have found a method of editing the human genome. So now you have the sequence of the human genome, but you can actually change it. That means ultimately you can change human beings. And therefore, this has become, it has both advantages and disadvantages. Scientists who want to explore the technique hail it as a biomedical advance that could give people the option not to pass down heritable diseases. So if they have, they can decide not to give it to their children. The tool could also reduce the number of embryos that are discarded during fertility treatments. I don't know, you probably this IVF techniques, there are several embryos and many of them are actually fertilized, but only one is actually, transplanted. But critics on the other side say that the scientists are out of control, okay? Because, editing human genome is something about whose consequences we do not know. It's like improving the human race or, it's very scary actually. So, so this George Annas, director of the Center of Health Law, Ethics and Human Rights at the Boston University, says that scientists should not edit the genomes of human embryos for any reason. This is very interesting. They want to control nature, but they can't control themselves. Okay? So we are playing with fire, and so therefore scientists have to be also very responsible. So what I have actually tried to give you is a flavor of what is happening in genetics. And now genetics has not only come to our doorstep, it is in our genes now. So anybody can read your genome and it can have many societal implications, as I mentioned. I'll stop here, but just at the end I will give you a fun slide. By the way, Professor John Gurdon comes to India very often. He's been to Pune also. He did his work in 1960, but he got his Nobel Prize in 2012. So he had to wait for 52 years, okay? And his work is textbook material for people like us, and then we were very worried because Nobel Prize goes to only people who are alive. But fortunately, Professor John is hale and hearty, he's over 80, he still goes to Himalayas, okay, for trekking. I just want, to leave on a funny note. Actually, it has a lot of tragedy in it also, but this is the science report of Professor John Gurdon when he was in school, okay? I'll read it out for you. He got 231 marks out of 550. So he did very badly actually. His science teacher writes, "It has been a disastrous half. His work has been far from satisfactory. His prepared stuff has been badly learnt and several of his test pieces have been torn over." I think the students will find very similarity with their journals and all. One of such pieces of prepared work scored 2 marks out of a possible 50. Okay? His other work has been equally bad, and several times he has been in trouble because he will not listen. Okay? But will insist on doing his own work in his own way. I believe he has ideas about becoming a scientist. On present showing, this is quite ridiculous. If he can't learn simple biological facts, he would have no chance of doing the work of a specialist, and it would be sheer waste of time, both on his part and of those who have to teach him. Professor John Gurdon keeps this on his desk for inspiration, he says. Okay? So, with due regard for teachers, the message to students is don't always listen to your teachers. They may not judge you properly. But this apart, John Gurdon has done tremendous work in genetics. So I'll stop here. I don't know whether I have done justice to the vast subject, but we can have some discussion if you want. So it's again a combination. It's a polygenic trait. So that's the part that the scientists would like to know. And they, what happened in the Germany in Hitler's time, something of that kind. So it's a very dangerous thing if people are not responsible.
Is there any question?
Either it was too simple or too complicated. Yes, please.
Is any character make difference in genetic program? Characters means there is some स्वभाव म्हणतो ना आपण. Honesty or ethics.
So genetics is not changed by anything that comes from, but there is a new branch of biology now which is known as epigenetics, which is above genetics. Epigenetics, above genetics. So what happens there is, depending on our, let's say, nutrition, for generations, the gene structure can be modified. Okay? So we can actually influence that. I mean, not consciously. It gets influenced by epigenetic factors. So nowadays, genetics has not remained only genetics, but we have gone further than that. Epigenetic factors. Okay? So for example, let's take a Japanese person who has always been eating Japanese food. He goes to the US, changes his nutrition, suddenly becomes susceptible to many cancers because of genetic modifications in the genes that can cause cancer. So this can happen. Okay. Swabhav means not swabhav, exactly nutrition, environment. Environmental pollutants are creating a lot of diseases by modifying our genes. Okay. So for example, if the mother is alcoholic, the child will have a smaller brain. Okay. So these things, that kind of behavior can modify that. But I don't think, तुम्ही ज्या स्वभाव या याच्यातून म्हणताय की सात्विक स्वभाव असलं तर काय होईल, तसं काही होईल असं मला वाटत नाही.
आता ते हिमालयात जात होते ना, तिकडचं एन्व्हायरमेंट.
कोण हे गर्डन? नाही पण ते काम केल्यानंतर बऱ्याच वर्षांनी हिमालयात जायला लागले. काम केलं तेव्हा ते इंग्लंड केम्ब्रिज मध्येच होते. म्हणजे जेनेटिकली मला वाटतं तिथे जेनेटिक्स सुद्धा हार खाईल आपल्या देशामध्ये.
सर अजून एक प्रश्न होता, कॉग्निटिव्ह सायन्स ही काय ब्रांच आहे?
नाही म्हणजे कॉग्निशन म्हणजे आपलं अंडरस्टँडिंग ऑफ द नेचर ऑफ द एन्व्हायरमेंट ऑफ अदर पीपल, दॅट इज अ ब्रेन फंक्शन. त्याचा जेनेटिक म्हणजे ब्रेन डेव्हलपमेंटचा जेनेटिक्सशी संबंध आहे, पण कॉग्निटिव्ह फंक्शन हे बेसिकली आपल्या ब्रेनचं आहे.
पण एन्व्हायरमेंटल म्हणजे वेगवेगळं एन्व्हायरमेंट जे आहे.
एन्व्हायरमेंट म्हणजे सगळंच. तुम्ही माझ्याशी आत्ता बोलताय इथलं हे सगळ्याचं कॉग्निशन इन्क्लुडिंग टेम्परेचर. मला आता पुण्याला परत जायचंय, हे सगळं हे कॉग्निशनचा भाग आहे. हे सगळं कळतं आपल्याला आजूबाजूला काय चाललंय ते कॉग्निशन.
आता आम्ही हिमालयात, मी स्वतः ढेकर आहे, दरवर्षी जातो. पण तिथल्या लोकांची जी प्रोग्रामिंग झालेली आहे किंवा त्यांना कुठल्याही गोष्टीची भीती वाटत नाही, तेवढं आपण गेल्यानंतर आपल्याला वाटते. तर ते काय म्हणतात, जेनेटिकली दे आर प्रोग्राम, म्हणजे दे आर मेड फॉर
नाही, वर्षानुवर्ष जर राहिलं ना तर आपल्या याच्यामध्ये फरक पडू शकतो कॅरेक्टरमध्ये. म्हणजे आता थंडीत राहणारे लोक आणि गरम प्रदेशात राहणारे लोक, त्यांच्या स्किनमध्ये पण फरक पडला आपल्याला माहिती. युरोपमधले लोक आहेत कारण त्यांना गरज नाही, त्यांच्याकडे एवढा सनलाईट नसतो. त्यामुळे हे वर्षानुवर्षाच्या आणि पण हा इव्होल्युशनचा भाग आहे, हा कॉग्निशनचा भाग नाही. आवर बॉडी इव्हॉल्व्ह, म्हणजे आपण शेवटी सगळे ॲनिमल्स आणि प्लांट जे आहेत ते इव्हॉल्व्ह झालेले. आधी फार सिम्पल होते, म्हणजे म्हणजे फ्रूट फ्लाय आधी होती आणि ह्युमन्स नंतर आले. बिकॉज वी आर इव्हॉल्विंग, वी आर स्टील इव्हॉल्विंग. बट आय एम टॉकिंग अबाउट बायोलॉजिकल इव्होल्युशन, नॉट कल्चरल इव्होल्युशन. म्हणजे आपण कल्चरली काही लोक फार ॲडव्हान्स्ड आहे असं पण म्हणतो, तसं नाही म्हणत मी. बायोलॉजिकल इव्होल्युशन म्हणतो. जेनेटिक फॅक्टर्समुळेच होतं इव्होल्युशन. No, no. So evolution, basically, it's an accident. Okay. So let me take a very classic example. There used to be some very white-colored moths in England. So that is why they changed their color. They did not change the color. It so happened that the mutation for melanin was such that some moths accidentally became dark. Okay, and then when they were sitting on the tree trunks which they were dark, they were not seen by the birds who were preying on them. So they survived, their population increased. But they did not change in one generation saying that if I become dark, I will be saved. It is not like, so genetics is not conscious either. And it is the first event is accidental. The mutation is accidental. Now if they had become whiter than the earlier ones, they would be wiped out. They will not evolve because they will. Evolution has to do with survival.
But when you say from fruit fly,
Not fruit fly. We have not come from there. The basic genes are used. So we have not come from monkeys. We may have a common ancestor, but both are diverged in a different. So monkey lost its tail and it became a human. That is not evolution. So that picture that is predicted from a monkey to a person sitting with a computer is completely wrong biology. Scientifically, it is not correct. So monkey is not converted into a human being. Evolution happened in such a way that there was an accidental organism which started which lost its tail, or started walking on 2 legs instead of 4. We became biped. So it's an accident. Opposability of thumb. कोणामध्येच नाहीये. आपल्यामध्ये असल्यामुळे आपण खूप गोष्टी करू शकतो. मंकीचे कुठल्या ॲनिमलचे एकत्र असतात. सो ऑल दिस थिंग्स आर रिझल्ट ऑफ इव्होल्युशन, in which the first event is accidental. The second event is selection. Because one which has better chance of survival, like the moth, the black moth will survive because it has better chance of survival. So it will be selected by nature, not by some entity.
is it possible to make more intelligent progeny?
Well, it looks like, but unless one, by interfering, so in principle it is possible, because people now are editing the.
Larger brain.
It's possible, but you know, we don't know how different genes will react to a larger brain. The person may not survive because you are compromising probably with his liver or heart. So it's not as easy as it sounds, because you know, these are all polygenic traits. See, ultimately we have the number of cells that a human being is made up of is finite. If you give too many cells to brain, some other organ will become smaller, may not survive. We think brain is important because we are talking from the point of view of intelligence. But everything is important. Probably bigger brain is not important for survival. See, evolution happens only for survival and reproduction, not for intelligence. Yes, ma'am.
Skills and talents जे असतात,
Huh.
are they genetically or they
To an extent,
or evolution?
so it's both nature and nurture there, because so when we used to say that it's in the blood, then it's now in the genes, we know that. But you know, there are things which run in families, that is true, which has a genetic basis. But that doesn't mean that every offspring will be as good as his, yeah, right. So it's because it is polygenic. And ultimately what happens is, when sperm and oocyte meet, there is a mixture of both the mother and father. So, that famous joke whether of Taylor. So it can happen any which way because you are giving one allele from one parent, the other. What combination it will come, there is no guarantee because these are random events. Which sperm will fertilize the oocyte, we don't know. There are millions of sperms, only one will win to fertilize. So we don't know what alleles that sperm is. We don't even know whether it is X or Y.
It's not a physical property. A talent is a.
Yes, it is multigenic actually. There are many things.
It's
So
not something that you can see or feel or touch or.
right.
It's just a quality.
And it is multifactorial. So it is also multigenic.
But does genes have anything to do with talent or say literature? Somebody becomes a very good.
People claim that they have isolated genes for alcoholism or for Oh, but we haven't understood that really.
Can you produce another?
No, since the combination is random, we have not come to the stage where we can actually choose and
go back.
pick and choose and then put such kit together, fortunately. Because, you never know. Yes?
So when we say genetic evolution and in a controlled
No,
environment.
I am saying biological evolution, genetic evolution.
Traditionally genetics. So in controlled atmosphere, in lab and all, it can go positive. But when it's in nature, is it that?
No, even in labs, it is very difficult to do positive. You have no control over evolution. Even in the labs, it's not possible.
And not in nature.
No, nature, of course, we have no control over it. It happens as a random event, as I told you. And if the random event is beneficial for the organism, not organism, for the species, for survival, then it will be selected. So first is mutation, the second is natural selection. It is natural selection, nobody can select it. Yes, please.
Cancer and genetics. याचा काही संबंध आहे?
संबंध आहे जवळचा कारण because most of the cancer have genetic basis. I will tell you the reason. We have many genes which have been incorporated in our genome from viruses. Okay, and this has happened millions of years ago. Not millions, thousands of years ago. And these genes now are useful to us because they carry out normal functions. These genes known as proto-oncogenes. Okay, cellular proto-oncogenes. So they are present in cell. Now when these genes start behaving badly, they become oncogenes. So proto and onco. We need proto-oncogenes for our normal survival. When they become oncogenes, they lead to oncogenesis, cancer. Oncology is study of cancer. So we have those genes, and most of these genes get mutated, and the result of which is that cells don't stop dividing. So we get tumors. Now this mutation can be genetic, it can run in families, as she was asking, but it doesn't mean that every member will get. It depends on what is the frequency of that particular mutation. Okay, but mainly it can come from environment also. Smoking, for example, or pollution. It can convert a proto-oncogene into an oncogene. So, you may have genetic basis, but if your lifestyle is good, you may not activate the gene and never get cancer. That is why good lifestyle is always good. I mean, you can't say that such and such a person is smoking 30 cigarettes, nothing happens to him. But for you, even that smoke from his cigarette can create cancer. Because we are all different. Why we are different is because of random segregation of genes that Mendel found for the first time.
So everyone carries proto-oncogenes?
Yeah, thousands of them in our body. They are required. They carry out normal functions. They are known as cellular oncogenes, cellular proto-oncogenes, because our cells have them. So over the years, this has got into our. So viruses are particles with either DNA or RNA. They go inside the cell, they release their DNA or RNA and make more virus using our machinery. And then they go out. But sometimes that DNA or RNA get incorporated in our DNA. That is what has happened during evolution, and those genes we are using for our own purpose now. So now if you remove them, we will not be able to survive. And this is not true only for humans. For every plant, organism, microorganism, animal, this has happened. This is known as vertical gene transfer.
So if you go back maybe 10,000 years ago when this virus had not entered our body.
Yeah, but it may have entered the early early homos. So it must have been passed to us from very early years, not when we actually became Homo sapiens. This must have got integrated because the first animal, there was a paper yesterday in Nature. They say 650 million years ago. The first alga came. Alga. And then after that, humans are there only for maybe fraction of a second. Just last few thousand years. So all these old animals are actually more successful than us. Because as far as biology is concerned, survival and reproduction is the criteria for success. Okay? Thank you.
आजच्या भाषणात शिक्षकांवर फार विश्वास ठेवू नका.
आणि शिक्षकांना विद्यार्थी समजतो असं नाही.
एक्झॅक्टली. आणि सोडायचं म्हणजे
त्याचं भविष्य समजत.
इफ यू वॉन्ट टू डू समथिंग रिअली वेल, यू हॅव टू बी आन्सर दॅट, आय सपोज.
I think same was true of Einstein also.
बायोलॉजिकल सायंटिस्ट हे निसर्गामध्ये ढवळाढवळ करतायत का, आणखीन एक धोक्याची सूचना. तेव्हा आपण फार आम्हाला समजेल अशा भाषेमध्ये, सोप्या भाषेमध्ये, कारण बायोलॉजी हा विषय सहजी समजत नाही. तुलनेने फिजिक्स लवकर समजतं, केमिस्ट्री लवकर समजते, बायोलॉजी समजायला अवघड आहे. पण इतके प्रश्न आले ह्याचाच अर्थ असा की लोकांच्यामध्ये काही उत्सुकता आपण निर्माण केलीत. धन्यवाद त्याच्याबद्दल. पुढच्या महिन्यातलं भाषण 3ऱ्या शुक्रवारी 15 सप्टेंबर व्हर्टिकल फार्मिंग ह्या विषयावरती. म्हणजे जमीन आपल्याला हळूहळू कमी पडत चालली का, तर लोकसंख्या वाढत चालली, त्यामुळे जास्त धान्याची गरज निर्माण होते. हे जास्त धान्य आहे त्या जमिनीवरती कसं काढायचं, त्यामुळे मग आता आकाशापर्यंत आपल्याला जाता येईल का. स्वामीनाथनने हा विचार फार पूर्वी मांडलेला आहे. त्यामुळे व्हर्टिकल फार्मिंग ह्या नवीन विषयावरती BRCतले निवृत्त शास्त्रज्ञ डॉक्टर शरद पांडुरंग काळे ते बोलणार आहेत. आपण मोठ्या संख्येने त्याच्यासाठी यावं. धन्यवाद.